Hey everybody, welcome to part 2 of our detailed tape-up review of the brand new ICM 148 scale B-26 Marauder. In part 2, we're going to cover the engines, the engine nacelles, how the nacelles fit on the wings, and the landing gear. And I've got some solutions for that, and we'll talk about that in more detail. But the landing gear is not as robust as it needs to be, considering the amount of weight that you got to put on this aircraft in order to get it to stabilize on its tricycle landing gear. So, with that, let's get started on part 2.
I've got one of the engine nacelles taped up to show you a problem here. It's not a major problem, but the positioning pins, there's 1, 2, 3 positioning pins here, and all 3 of these do this with the seam. So what you have to do is cut the positioning pins off and flatten the surface, and when you do that, you get a nice tight fit, like on this one, excuse me. The other thing is that the instructions call for the door actuator parts to be glued in place before you do anything else to this, and I recommend you do that. You just have to be careful with these door actuators that you don't bend them and snap them off. But they fit in place nicely. You got to trim one end just a tiny bit, like a 32nd of an inch. And what I did was I put a little bit of Tester's glue here, set it in place, and then kind of worked my way down as the glue was drying and pushed against the inside so it's tight, and then put some drops of super glue right along the top edge here, and that worked really well. So this is what it looks like when it's done. Now, on this one, what I did was, and I've got to run through this because there are some issues here that you need to be aware of. What I did was, of course, I removed the aligning pins, I taped everything together, and I installed this bulkhead first, this one second, and then this one, and that sequence worked really well. But you got to close it up in order to get these bulkheads to position correctly, because there's tiny tabs on the inside, and there's tabs on these bulkheads, and you need to sand those down a little bit to get a much tighter fit. So that worked out really well. Again, I did 1, 2, 3, and then after I got these bulkheads and glued on one side and positioned correctly, then I went ahead and glued everything, glued the left and right sides together. So now on these exhaust ports, I didn't drill these out, but these are easy to drill out, and I would recommend you do that. They should have been hollow, but they're not. Now, these covers, you can see there's a seam here, and there's a seam here, and what I think they were trying to replicate the actual seam work associated with the covers for the exhaust. The problem you have is that the tree tabs sit right on these edges, and these edges are very thin, so you need to be very careful how you cut these off, because if you gouge this anyway, it's going to be very obvious on you. And again, these are very thin. So those are my comments on the engine cowlings. And once I get this one assembled, and I'm going to do this one a little bit differently, I'm going to go ahead and cut the pins off, glue this one on the inside and this one on the inside down here, but leave this open so that I can spread this just a little bit to get the 3 bulkheads installed correctly and positioned properly, and then I'll glue them in place. So that may be the better way to go, so that you don't have these huge beads of glue along the surfaces. Now, on this one, you're still going to have to, you've got to do some seam work here. And the only detail that you're going to have to fix is this little piece, right, is this cross section here. And one of these razor cutters will work really well to fix that. So there you have it. So the next thing I want to talk about is the engine assembly. And I've got one engine almost completely assembled. And the the front rows and the back rows are in two parts, and they fit together really well. I wouldn't mess with cleaning them up, because from the front, this is all you're going to see right there. And they have little tabs for adding the wiring, and I'm sure Edward's going to come out with a wiring harness for this, which will really enhance this and make it look good. So yeah, the engine looks pretty good. I was hoping that a 3D printed engine by our Resin 2 Details would fit in here, but the Resin 2 Details engine is much too big in diameter to fit inside this engine cowling. It's just way too big. So I'm going to order an engine front, and I'll see if that fits better, but I suspect the diameter is still going to be too big. Although these engines are nice, they're nicely done. The assembly is a little, the front and back rings here, this one goes on good. This back ring is what attaches to that piece right there. And there's only 3 tiny positioning tabs. So after you get this set correctly, you need to put some drops of super glue where the ring touches the back sides of the engines to get it stronger. Otherwise, it's going to wiggle on you. Which it's either this plate or this plate is not exactly flat. And so when you position this, it's really hard to, goes this way. It's really hard to get it on the 3 pins, but this is what you get. So you got to really be careful how you set this in place and make sure that it's straight. So that's how it looks from the underside. Now, the engine cowlings are multi-pieced. That piece fits nicely in place, and what it is it does that so that the air intake under here is hollow. So that's how they did that, and that's fine. Now, on the upper air intakes, there's also these pieces, and the problem is these pieces don't fit very well here, and there's an interference problem between these pieces on the inside and how they fit on the top half of the engine cowling, and I'll show you in a second. So what you need to do is deviate from the instructions and assemble the engine, and then you put the engine in place, and you want to tape it really, really tight, just like that. And then what you have to do is you have to glue these in place. And you can see with the insert in place, it creates a gap right there. Now, if you don't put the inserts in place, the gap is a lot less. And so I recommend that you not put those inserts in. And this is going to be really, really difficult to fix. So just be mindful of that. You can get it on the outside, but not on the inside. So I haven't glued these in place yet. I'm going to go ahead and glue the ones in place on this on this engine cowl that don't have these inserts glued in place. And then I've got to check the fit, so I need to do that, and then I'll show you how that looks. But I'm going to check the fit of the engine nacelles on the wings, and at the same time this. So that'll be in the next video. But again, don't put those inserts in and you'll get a much better fit. So that's kind of how it looks. I wish they hadn't done that, hadn't done it this way, hadn't engineered it this way. These pieces right here are what's going to be the problem. And if they had just put them here, it would have been a much better fit and would look a lot better. So the other reason why you need to install the engine is these rings will will provide you the necessary support to hold this in place while the glue dries, just like that. If you don't do that, it's going to be really, really difficult to get these positioned correctly, because the only surface that you have is right here. That's it. So that's why it's important to do it this way. The other thing is that I checked the positioning of the landing gear doors. You see how these bend? Now this one's going to break on me if I'm not careful. It's already bent once. The door pins fit really, really nicely in these depressions here. You can see the depressions, and it was nicely engineered, so they fit really, really nice, just like that. And again, you're going to have to be really, really careful with these, because if you break them off, it's going to be really hard to glue them back in place and get it right. And if you drill these out, it'll look pretty good. Again, I'm not sure how this is all going to fit together when I do this. Let's see here. Yeah, not bad. It's the upper areas that you're going to have to work on. So, yeah, so far looking pretty good. With these modifications and changes that I pointed out to you, it'll help you with your construction sequence so that you don't get frustrated. Now, the kit also, I need to pop this out. The kit also has these really, really tiny parts, and they're exhaust extensions that go from here to here and here to here. If you're not going to display the engine in any way with these panels off, don't mess with them, because they're really, really hard to position correctly. I tried to do a few of them, and I just couldn't get it positioned correctly because it's a really, really tight fit. And it really doesn't matter. It's a nice touch for a well-detailed engine, but if you're going to close everything up, you really don't need these parts. So that concludes my comments on the engines and the engine nacelles. And like I said, I'm going to go ahead and construct this one a little bit differently, and I'll get back with you in a few minutes and let you know whether that way is better or the new way I'm going to do it is better. So I really like these engines. With a little bit of wiring and some painting, it'll look pretty good. And of course, on the front face of a radial engine, the things that really stand out are the wiring harnesses and these pieces right here, the push rods. And they're all separate, so it's easy to paint, and it'll look pretty good. The cooling vanes on the cylinder heads are kind of shallow, but I think when you paint them up, they're going to look pretty good. So, yeah, everything's going together with these minor tweaks. Pretty good so far. I tried the technique of cutting the positioning pins to get a tighter fit, and then I taped just the left and right sides. I taped them together, and I ran super glue on the inside area here first, and then I did the inside area of this area, and I left this area just taped so that I could spread it out a little bit and then install the 3 bulkheads. And that worked a lot better than attempting to do the gluing after you got the bulkheads in place. So I think the technique that works better is this one, which is gluing this face and this face. And then, of course, you still need to put a tiny, tiny bead of super glue along these seam lines and sand them down. But this seems to work better. And again, you've got to sand down the positioning tabs here and here on all three of these in order to get them to sit correctly. And it's just, you know, it's the best you can do. So once you get one side glued in place and positioned, you can go ahead and run beads of super glue around the perimeters. And then what I did was I positioned this correctly, the edges here, taped it tightly, and then I super glued just this tip first and then this tip to kind of hold it in place. And then I got drops of super glue down along the seam line inside there. It's kind of a hit and miss thing, but I was able to get it in there. There, you can see it right there, the super glue. And of course the super glue here. So that worked better. And then I went ahead, again, I had to cut the positioning tabs on the mufflers and get them in place because the positioning tabs are too big. And then I was more diligent about cutting the tabs off of these parts because these edges are very, very thin, but I still had fit problems with them. They don't really fit in place very well. So now the positioning, the engine nacelles are completely done. And on this one, I went ahead and sanded down the super glue and then rescribed the lines using my trusty razor saw, and that worked really, really well. So then I've got to, we'll have to do the same back here when I run a bead. Now, I've got also both engines almost completely assembled. And again, you've got to be careful when you assemble the front and back together. You've got to flatten the surface between the two, otherwise they rock. I didn't do it on this one. And I think the engine is skewed just a tad this way. So you've got to be careful how you do that. And I haven't done these pieces yet. And I don't think I will because it's not necessary for the dry fit of the main components. But you can see right here. See how it's skewed a little bit? So this one came out better. This one is skewed a little bit. So you really need to be careful how you do this. So when I fit this one inside of the forward engine nacelle, it didn't fit as well. And so what I did was I scraped down just a little bit along this edge here, and that helped a lot to get it smoothed out. And I did it on this one too, just to get it so that it would fit better. So they fit okay inside the cowlings. So you need to assemble, again, you need to assemble these and get them in here in order to be able to set the tops of the scoops. And they don't, the scoops just, they don't fit very well in place. So this one, you're going to have to put a bead of super glue on these edges and carefully clean them up. This opening here is about 10 thousandths, and so a 10,000 strip of evergreen strip stock will fix that. On this one, and what I did here to get a better fit of these air scoops, remember that I said that these inserts interfere. So what I did was I peeled back the forward areas of the inserts and sanded it down a little bit, and that worked better for inserting this in place and then gluing the scoops in place using the technique that I already talked about. And again, about 10 thousandths strip stock will work well there. So you're going to have to do some sanding and cleanup work to get these to look good. Now, the tops of the engine nacelles fit better on this one and this one than it did on this one. This one's a little off, and I can't figure out what happened here. I don't think you can push this down any. You just have to fill it with some super glue. So this is all the construction work I'm going to do on these components. Now, the last thing I wanted to show you was, let me put this one back in here, that when you go to, and now they're set on their pins, and when you go to put these in place, this is what you're dealing with. So what you need to do is sand this down a little bit in order to get a much tighter fit of the engine cowling onto the engine nacelle. Otherwise, you've got a gap here, which is going to look kind of crappy. So the bottom fits okay, but when you do that, you get this gap on the top. So this needs to be sanded down. And of course, what you need to do first is go ahead and drill these holes deeper so that when you sand this down, you won't lose your positioning holes for the pins that are here. And that'll give you a much tighter fit. So, and it's like this on this one too. They're both the same way. And so here, same thing. So yeah, you've got to sand this down, and you don't know to do that until you put all this together and attempt to put it on. If you don't sand that down, you're going to have a problem, and it's not going to look right. So when the bottom is butted here, you've got a gap, and it's a little more than 10 thousandths up here. So that's how you fix this. Drill these holes deeper and sand this down, and you should be okay. So again, you got to watch how you do it, because you don't want to break these tabs. They'll be really, really hard to position correctly because they're so thin. But you know, there's a lot of surface detail on here, but it just it's going to take a lot of work. You could probably get a little bit of white glue in there after you prime this to get it to look good. But you can see here, even me being very, very careful, there's a gouge right there. Now move it closer so you can see it. And that's because this lip is so thin and the tree attachment point is right on the edge. So that one is okay. And on this one, I was a little bit more careful. What I did was I cut the tree attachment points and left a little bit on the edge here, and then I cut it off on this wood block, laid it down, and then carefully cut it. And it seemed to do okay, but still got a slight gouge here on this side. And this one's okay, but again, there's a slight gouge here too. So there's just no way around it, and it's the way they constructed the kit. And you've got to sand down this edge a little bit to get it flush in order for the this to fit correctly. So, because it's going to butt up against the inside of this area here. So yeah, and I've kind of checked the fit. Just did a real quick dry fit, and there's some issues associated with the attachment to the wing too. So once I do that, I'll show you how that looks. So there you have it. So it's on to, I got to work on the interior bulkheads on the fuselage and see how all that goes together. I checked the fit of the propellers on the propeller shafts, and they don't quite fit. That's what you get. And that's not going to work. So what you need to do is drill that out a little bit so that it sits on here correctly. And then you can put the hub on. So, and the hub, you're going to have to use tiny drops of Tester's glue, because there's no positioning cup for this hub. It just pops on here, and it's real easy to skew it. So you need to be very, very careful how you do that. So that's, again, I don't understand how they didn't catch this. But anyway, that's how you have to fix the propellers onto the propeller shafts. The nacelles, the engine nacelles, and this is for both of them, left and right, they fit really, really nice. So all you need to do is just put some tiny drops of super glue in the center of these two troughs here, or I use tester's glue. Just some tiny drops, and you hold it here and here, and just hold it in place until it dries. It takes just a minute or so. And then on the front top, right here, that closes up really, really nice on both sides. Really, really nice. Just a little bit of seam work and you're done. Now on the back, this pops up, so if you just use some slow set super glue with tiny drops on the inside and just hold it down. That's all you got to do on both sides. And here's the other side. I'm trying to be careful here. I don't want to break these tabs. Same thing. Nice and tight. So this is definitely an improvement over the 148 scale monogram Revell kit and the 148 scale AMT kit. Nice work. So, yeah, looks good. And oh, by the way, the instructions call for these wing pitot tubes on the left and right sides to be cut off. The forward landing gear sits in place on two tiny pins. You can just barely see them. This one and this one. And they sit inside of those cups. Now, to get this to sit correctly, you've got to sand that pin down and that pin down just a little bit, otherwise it just pops out on you. And the thing is that even if you put a lot of super glue on here, the forward nose on this aircraft is going to take a lot of weight. And I am very concerned that these pins are not going to hold. It's just going to, the whole thing is just going to crush on you. So, but that's how it goes together. And then there's this piece, and the instructions are not real clear. It goes something like this. Let me see, there's a little depression in there. So it goes something like this, and the instructions are not real clear how that's really supposed to sit. So, yeah, this is going to be a serious problem. So you either don't add weight and put a ladder on the backside of the fuselage to hold it up. Now, I got to tell you, on both the AMT kit and the Revell kit, monogram Revell kit in 148 scale, they compensated for this. There's a pin on the base of this that sits in here, and it can take a lot of weight. This is not going to be able to take a lot of weight. Now that's the first issue. The second issue, let me get these out of the way, is on the hubs are separate, which is nice, so that they're easy to paint, but they attach to the trees right on this edge, and this edge is very, very thin, and it's very, very hard to get it right. So it's a little off because there was just no way to cut it, and I used these delicate snippers to cut it off, and I still marred it. Now, they sit just like this. Now, luckily, this is on the inside. The one that's on the outside was a little bit better. And you can see that. So, I mean, it's nice to be able to paint them separately and then install them. But here's the other problem you're going to have. When you put the wheel on the axle, it moves around a lot because there's nothing holding it in place except for this tiny thin diameter piece of plastic in here. So what you're going to need to do is glue some tubing, plastic tubing on the inside of here to help give it a little more strength, and probably a tiny piece of 10 thousandths on here, super glue it on here, and then form fit it into place. That's how you're going to have to do that, because other than that, it's just really, really loose. Now, the tires, the main wheel tires, they're a little bit better in terms of their fit. They're thicker, so the tree attachment points, again, are on the edge, but it's easy to get them on without marring them too bad. See, even I was very, very careful, and I still marred that a little bit. Luckily, it's on the inside. The one on the outside was easier to clean up without marring it. Now, you're going to have the same problem here. There's nothing on the inside to help stabilize the axle. So you're going to need to glue some tubing on the inside here so that there's a channel for the axles to sit on. And again, you're going to have to laminate some 10 thousandths strip here so that you get a really tight fit, and then form fit it on here. It's not much, it's probably less than 5 thousandths, but just glue some 10 thousandths on here and then sand it down, and just keep checking it until you get it nice and tight. Now, here's the real dilemma. The way these landing gear are designed, this pin, this tiny pin, and this tiny pin are the only things that hold the landing gear in place, just like that. There's a tiny depression here, there's 2 depressions here, and they really don't fit very well. So the other thing is, you got to make sure that the structural framing that glues on this side is the correct one. They're different, and it's the pins. The pin on this side is longer than the pin on this side, and I did not pay attention to the instructions on this, and I didn't see this until after I glued them on, and it's too late now. So what I got to do is cut the pins off and glue some pins on here, because if you don't, what's going to happen is that the landing gear is going to sit cockeyed, and it's got to sit straight. The other thing is, on the Marauder, the landing gear sits a little, it's kind of strange, it sits forward. And I can't tell how this is, whether it's going to sit correctly or not. Now, these pins are supposed to help set the angle correctly, and the problem is they don't fit very well inside of these depressions. That's got to be a little bit thinner to get this to fit well, and it's really, really hard to do because you're going to have the engine nacelle glued to the wing, and so you're going to have to kind of work it in there, knowing that it doesn't fit very well. So you need to test the fit on these. And again, the instructions are not real clear on where this goes on here. Nor is there anything that shows you where this piece right here attaches to the landing gear. I suspect it attaches here and here, but I'm not sure. I think that's how it's supposed to go. But again, you're going to have to make sure that you check the fit of these things before you put them, before you glue the engine nacelles on. Otherwise, you're going to get very frustrated very fast. So I had this set in place once. Now I can't get it back. So I don't know why they did this. This is very delicate, and there's no way that this is going to add any structural support to
the landing gear here, and while it may be accurate in terms of its size and diameter, when you glue all this together, this landing gear is probably going to collapse on you, considering the amount of weight it's going to have to hold. So I'm trying not to be too negative here, but they should have thought this through a little bit better. You see, I just cannot get it back into this depression. And again, these are specific, so I got them numbered. This one and this one are different, and they're each one is set specifically for its location inside the wing. Let me see if I can get it here. Nope, can't do it. Oh well, can't do it. So those are my comments on the landing gear. Excuse me, I'm not sure how you fix all this, but definitely these tiny pins, and I don't understand why they did this. This is weird. It almost looks like there should be some kind of opening here that this slides into, but there's just no way. This is really bad, because you spent all this time working on the kit and everything fits together fairly well, but the landing gear, it's just not going to work. I hate to say it, but the only way you can do this is you're going to have to not put any weight in here and put a ladder on the back side of the fuselage to hold everything correctly on its tricycle landing gear. It's just not going to work. I know how much weight it takes to balance this aircraft correctly, because I built two of these. I built the AMT kit and I built the Monogram Revell kit. And both of them have stout landing gear and stout locations to slide the landing gear into. This does not. So there you have it. The other comment I had on the tires, you have to cut off the locating pins, because if you don't, you have the same problem like you had on the fuselage. There's a tiny raised area around each pin, and it prevents the left and right sides of the tires from sitting flat. So if you cut them off, and what I did was I marked it where one side of the pin was, so that the tread lines up. Because if you skew it, the tread's not going to line up. And it's a nice tight fit. And I really like having the hub separate. It saves a lot of time in masking, but it's the landing gear. And like I said, it'll collapse on you. It takes a lot of weight to get this tricycle landing gear on this aircraft to sit correctly. So unfortunately, when I do the introduction, I'm not going to be able to have the aircraft on its landing gear because of this problem. And I've got to figure out how to fix it, and I'm sorry, but I cannot offer any solutions to you right now. The only thing I can think of is somebody's going to have to do this in brass so that it's much stronger, and modify how this attaches. And it's kind of a shame because it's a nice kit. I've been thinking about how to fix the fragile landing gear problem on this kit, and I think I have a solution. The Monogram landing gear will fit inside of this opening. And what you're going to have to do is flatten this out and drill a hole right here to accept the main gear, and then you can just lay the forward gear retraction mechanisms in place right here and right here. I think that'll work. And this piece is very, very strong because there's a cross piece under here. So yeah, I think that'll work. And the same thing on the forward landing gear. I think you just need to drill a hole right here. This is fairly strong, and that landing gear will sit right there
I think that's how you can solve this. And then you can add all the weight you want. So that's how I would fix it. And then that'll allow you to have all this beautiful interior detail displayed. So that's how I would do it. So you're going to have to use the monogram landing gear. The AMT kit, their engine nacelles are much larger and their landing gear are much larger. It won't fit from left to right. But the monogram landing gear will. So that's how you fix it.
Hey everybody, thanks for watching part 2 of our 2-part series on our detailed tape-up review of the brand new ICM 148 scale B-26 Marauder. With that, have a great evening and don't forget to subscribe to our channel, give us a thumbs up, and visit our website at www.mikeshe.com where you're going to find dozens and dozens of detailed downloads on PDF format that you can use in your scale modeling endeavors. Have a great evening.